Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Welcome to this joint webinar, which is between Finlandia Foundation National, Suomi-Seura, the Finland Society, and the Crisis Management Initiative, CMI, Martti Ahtisaari's Peace Foundation. It's a very timely topic. I don't have to tell you. It has been all over the news, here in the United States and internationally as well. With the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, suddenly there was a tremendous interest in Finland and elsewhere about NATO membership. And that process is already well underway now. And, we're here to talk about what are the implications for peace in all of this? What are the important considerations for Finland and its international reputation of a rather neutral party in all of this? Finland as a country that has been unaligned has been able to be a very effective broker amongst all sides. And so this is a very important topic for NATO membership and for Finland's reputation overall. Let me begin by introducing myself. I am Tim Nurvala. A very Finnish name, if ever there was one, right? And I am Executive Vice President of CCS Fundraising, which is a global fundraising firm. We have offices across the United States and work with many different organizations. But I'm here predominantly as a board member of Finlandia Foundation, which is a wonderful organization. It's one of the oldest and largest national organizations promoting Finnish culture in the United States. We are about to celebrate our 70th anniversary in 2023. So we have been around for a good long time, and we provide grants, provide scholarships, and we also fund innovative programming throughout the United States. We're probably best known for our Performer of the Year, our Lecturer of the Year programs, for our Fimposium series of different kinds of lectures and webinars, but we also have a lot of fun too. And so we're also the driving force behind the National Sauna Week, which is going to be happening in February. So when we do this through our 60 chapters. With that, I'm going to turn it over to one of the partners in this effort, Tina Strandberg, the Executive Director of Suomi-Seura, the Finland Society. Tina?
Thank you, Tim, and good evening from Helsinki to everybody. On behalf of Finland Society, Suomi-Seura, I really too would like to welcome you to this webinar today. Last summer, I was contacted by CMI, and we started to plan this event together with Finlandia Foundation National. Thank you for the very good cooperation in organizing this worldwide webinar on NATO membership and how it affects Finland's work for peace. Thank you so much. Suomi-Seura Finland Society is almost 100-year-old expert and service organizations for Finns abroad. In fact, Suomi-Seura's roots are in the Finnish immigration to America, and we still have very strong links with American Finns. Suomi-Seura promotes topics important to Finns worldwide and wants to make the Finnish expertise visible globally, as tonight. We have a worldwide network and members in 60 countries at the moment. And I want to tell you also that we publish the magazine Suomen Silta, Finland Bridge, and we also organize webinars and expatriate parliament sessions. So you are very welcome to contact us, and I'm looking forward to this webinar so much. And I wish all of you an interesting, I would like to say evening, because it's evening here in Helsinki, in Finland. So thank you so much for joining us today. And now, Riikka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tina, for your very kind words. And good morning, America. Good evening, Europe. And before we dive into the topic of this event, I would like to give you a very quick introduction to CMI Martti Ahtisaari Peace Foundation. CMI was founded in the year 2000 by the Nobel Peace Laureate and former President of Finland, Martti Ahtisaari. And in these 22 years, CMI has grown to be one of the leading organizations in the field of international peacemaking. We have a staff of about 70 people, supported by around 100 consultants coming from about 30 different nationalities. So we are very international, although the majority of the people come from Finland. We have advanced more than 50 peace processes in the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Eurasia, and Asia. And last year, we carried out 25 mediation and dialogue projects around the world in these areas that I just mentioned, and supported 12 peace processes in 13 countries. And last year, we also received a record number of requests, totaling 99, almost 100. And unfortunately, it seems that the number of requests will even be higher this year. There are also, in addition to the geographical areas where we work, there are two important cross-cutting themes in all the work. And one is women's role in peacemaking, and the other one is digital peacemaking. And all this work we are doing with the annual budget of 11.6 million last year. And the biggest sources of funding are the governments of Finland, Sweden, and Ireland, as well as the European Union. But also private funding is extremely important for us as it is more flexible. Its importance seems to be growing as we are heading towards recession in Europe, and there is growing turbulence all over the world. Therefore, we are at CMI seeking now an endowment of 30 million euros to secure our independence and to safeguard President Martti Ahtisaari's life, work, and legacy, which can be summed up in one sentence, which is our vision. And this is all conflicts can be resolved. We would very much appreciate if you could help us. So if you have any direct or indirect access to potential donors, please let us know, and I will share my contact information in the chat. And I do hope that after hearing our CEO, Ambassador Janne Taalas, being interviewed by our communications director, Antti Ämmälä, you will feel the urge to join our forces and lend your hand. But without further ado, Janne and Antti, the floor, or should I say the screen, is yours.
Many thanks, Riikka, and good to be here with you tonight or today. And as highlighted in the beginning, obviously Finland's forthcoming NATO membership has been a big topic issue in Finland. But something that hasn't been that much discussed is its relation to Finland's other strengths in foreign policy and in relation to CMI's work as well in peace mediation. So this is something we're going to discuss today deeply, and then we have time, plenty of time for questions from the audience as well. Let's see how long I will interview Janne here, but let's say 30 to 40 minutes. But if there are questions coming in rapidly, we can take more questions. So no problem in that sense. But that would be the order of things here. But Janne, maybe a few words from you to start with. Is there something you would like to add? What Riikka said actually on CMI, how to define CMI, what we do.
Thank you. I'll take a step back, and I think it is my great pleasure to thank Tim and Tina for the welcome and doing this together with the CMI. I have a kind of long-standing relationship with both, personal relationship with both with the Finlandia Foundation. I've been 8 years posted to New York, so I work with I've been in several Finlandia Foundation functions and so forth, so I very much appreciate the work it's doing. Also Suomi-Seura, I've spent 20 years more of my working life abroad. So I have been in different Suomi-Seura context many times, and my family has been. So you two are doing a great and important work. So so thank you for doing this together. It's a pleasure for me, personal pleasure. Then I think one kind of thought before we start from Helsinki. This is actually the first night I'm looking through the open window. It's getting dark here in Finland, and now it's the first. It is the first kind of teleconference or video conference. I need to use the electric light. So this is something that the autumn is coming to Helsinki, and we have had the rains and stuff. So it has been a great summer, but now it's clearer in autumn. But I think this is just to warm up. I'm very much looking forward, and my third point, very much looking forward for your questions and discussion. I see, and I can talk with Antti every day, but this is a unique opportunity, so please use it. And I think it's something that it would be, let's try to make this interactive. I think that's something that is, I would appreciate, because I very much interested also your views and your take on what is happening, and how do you see the situation. My kind of now getting to your question, the kind of long warm up. I see CMI as a Nordic startup or Finnish startup that in 20 years has been a very humble beginnings, very smart and great, sharp with around President Ahtisaari, a few people around President Ahtisaari. We have grown as in 20 years one of the world's leading private diplomacy actors. If you don't believe me, check The Economist ran a few years ago article on private diplomacy actors, and CMI was mentioned. I think there were 3 that were mentioned, and CMI was one of them. So clearly we have a significant impact, and we are really among the top actors in our field of mediation and private diplomacy actors. So that's, I'm very proud, and I consider us as a kind of Nordic startup. That means in practice, when I go different country, we very often have access high up into the hierarchy. Foreign minister higher up when the CMI makes visits to country. I have met several foreign ministers from different countries and kind of doors open for the CMI. We are well known, and the work we do is recognized. So I think that's important thing. What is the essence of CMI? My final point. I think we are Finnish, and the core Finnishness that lies at the very heart of the CMI is the legacy of President Ahtisaari. His sense of, and when I was serving at the UN, I was struck how many people remembered President Ahtisaari and his time at the UN Secretariat. And it was high to low, from security guards to janitors to high up to high UN people. And they all had the same kind of thought that President Ahtisaari met them and touched them, and was kind of there as a human being. No hierarchies. And this is something that I see as a core of CMI. We meet the people as human beings. We try to understand, we try to get the contact with them. And I think there is something essentially Finnish in it. And I think that's the core. When we go into the conflict area, that's something that what we do. We try to touch the people. We approach them at the same level, at the kind of eye height that we can discuss. And I think that's an important thing. At the same time, we are clearly Nordic. Nordic, I mean inclusion, and I don't see that it's only a Finnish concept. But I think that the kind of inclusive policies are very important. Women, that you have the whole society with you. It's not only Finland, but it's whole of the Nordic. And at the same time, also European, we have rule of law and democracy that are very important for us. That I think essentially European concepts. So I see CMI's, the very essence of CMI, a little bit like onion. You have to kind of, maybe the European, you deeper you go, but at the very core, there is this legacy of President Ahtisaari, meeting human beings as they are, trying to help them. And then comes with the inclusion, with the clear Nordic sense, and then rule of law and democracy that I see are widely shared in Europe. But that's my take of how I see what the CMI means at the core for me.
Thank you, Janne. Just to remind you, please use the chat box if you have any questions. Those will be answered and taken at the end of this interview. But I think we could now dig a bit deeper with today's theme, which is Finland's NATO membership and its impact on peace mediation. Just to start with, Janne, I know many of these discussions, but the audience doesn't know what kind of discussion there has been around Finland's NATO membership, sort of in the circles where we work. How would you describe this?
I think it's a good question. I have, as I said, I have traveled a lot since February, and I have on purpose being outside Europe and the West. For example, I've been in Algeria. I have been in Riyadh, and I have been in Tehran, and I will have still a few kind of, and I met quite high up people in these visits, and it has been important for me to understand how this discussion of NATO membership and the changes in Europe are seen outside the Europe. And it's interesting. The perspective is very different. The perspective. What I think the story I keep on telling, and I think that's an important point. When I go to these countries, that they ask about the Finnish NATO membership, the story I keep telling is that it was kind of less than a year ago, 8 months ago, 9 months ago, that there was a support for the Finnish NATO membership was about 1/4 of the population. This, let's say, December last year. There was 1/4 of Finns were supporting NATO membership. Then things started to happen, and they didn't happen in Finland. They happened in Russia. First important signal was there was a signal from Russia that the Russian kind of interpretation that Finland and Sweden would somehow be forbidden, or the kind of choices would be limited. I think that was taken quite seriously in Finland and in Sweden. And that was kind of clearly there was kind of point that that's not the case. And then what happened in Ukraine, 24th of February, Russian invasion, unprovoked invasion to Ukraine, that really changed the game. That really changed the situation in Finland. In many ways, and you see first how it changed. It pushed the support from the NATO membership from 1/4 to over 3/4 of population in a very, very short span of time. That is what you can empirically measure. That there was a population who thought that this is something that we should be doing. Why? And I think it's a good question, and that's what I tell to my foreign interlocutors. It was felt so. It was the kind of the feeling was that the Russia was not reliable neighbor anymore. Russia was not what we thought it was. There was a famous quote from the president of Finland, President Niinistö, that the masks came off, and that's something many Finns felt, that the kind of relationship that we had established with Russia was not it was not functional. It didn't work. If you look at and I think that the Finnish looked at what happened to Ukraine with one of the closest nations to Russia, is that how they can treat their closest like that, bomb them, treat the civilians like that, attack. What they would do to us we don't have the closeness. We have a different religion. The language is much further apart. Our society is different. So what would that we could be that the Russians don't have that no kind of that they could do something. If they could do something like that in Ukraine, think of what they could do in Finland. That was clearly the sense. I would also argue that it opened some very, very historic wounds that has existed in Finland. I guess most of the Finns who are kind of listening or I was speaking, have lost their family members in the wars. So this is something that is deeply wedded in all the kind of family histories. That's something that what was. So the reaction was very kind of emotional, very strong and emotional, and that explains the quick swing, how the kind of it went 1 quarter to over 3 quarters, and also it tells it kind of explains why there was so much support that Finland has given to Ukraine. That is really very, very striking. So I think the point what I'm telling and what I'm telling in detail is that there is many places feeling that this was a kind of elite-driven project to get Finland to join NATO, but it was not. And this is something what I keep hammering in the say Middle East. We're very used to this kind of undemocratic foreign policy making. Is that no? This was the population who felt threatened and felt that the policies that they had based on their security were partially eroded by the Russian unpredictability. So they had to cash in the option they had with the NATO, because that was clearly part of the security arrangement. So the Finns were not blue-eyed that there was kind of built-in fail-safe in the system, but that is clearly the system. I think, sorry about the long story, but I think it's important to realize that in many places around the world, they say this was the American plot to get Finland and Sweden joined the NATO. What I'm spending a lot of time telling, no, it was not. It was really the Finnish population very strongly willing and indicating that this is what we want to do. It is interesting, I think my point, and then getting closer to the peacemaking question, is that I'm used the metaphor that okay, Finland has been I used the kind of soccer term, football, European football soccer terminology. Finland has been like a kind of warming up outside the pitch, taking a little bit of and being prepared to be getting to the field if there is need to be for the NATO. That's how I see it, that it is fully capable of joining the NATO team if there was need to do that. That was the kind of the Finnish NATO option. So that it is to be a substitute for the NATO team. Now what Finland did, it just told that, okay, we go to the field, and they put the shirt on, they put the kit on. And now it's a NATO kit on, and they run into the field. I think it has been clear for many observers that Finland is a potential substitute, but now it happened. So it's not a surprise to any seasoned observer. But at the same time, what is important is that, like in football, the European soccer or the football, it is the player doesn't change if it puts the shirt on. You know, the kit doesn't change the player. The player always, good players, plays for their own strengths, even for the slightly different team. So what I would argue that the Finnish foreign policy and what is the Finnish society does not change radically. But it's clearly that what happens is that we have a situation that we play with our strengths, but in a different team and maybe slightly different position. That happens in the teams. But that's my kind of longest explanation and failed kind of sports metaphors to explain how the Finnish NATO membership influences how the essence of the Finnish foreign policy. And I see the peacemaking as a part of the essence of the Finnish foreign policy. Thanks.
Thanks, Janne. So to sum it up somehow, as said, Finland has been known as a sort of a bridge builder and problem solver. And even though we will be now military aligned, this won't change, so to speak.
it means that, yeah, we will be military aligned. I think maybe I should have been clearer. I think the joining EU was a much important and bigger change than joining NATO. That was a more sudden and more societal change. Now it is more like, as I said, putting a kit on, changing and running into the field. So it does not change the kind of, it might change, and you know, coach will give you instructions where to play and how to play, but you cannot kind of reinvent yourself if you don't know certain kind of, certain weaknesses you cannot hide, or the strengths you better play with the strengths. So I think this is something that I see is important. So I don't see being kind of being within the NATO does not change the essence of the Finnish foreign policy that has been a long time been kind of active peace policy, you know, peace, the peacemaking and also peacekeeping that Finland has been involved for a long time. So I see that it would need a bigger change to get rid of that. I think that is clearly part of the Finnish psyche and the Finnish landscape of how we engage with the world.
On the other hand, could one say that there are sort of new opportunities rising from this membership? Obviously there are going to be new networks and sort of stakeholders we can work with more closely. Do you see this, on the other hand, as an opportunity for peacemaking?
Yeah, I think it's yeah, like most things in life. Now speaking very specifically on peacemaking and the field of CMI. Yes, I think first there is a minus. I have heard it, and there are questions. What does CMI change somehow when Finland joins NATO? And my answer is no. We will keep on doing what we have been doing, and we will show every day in our work that we can add value. I think that's an important point, that we will. I would argue that we have not been invited. We have not been invited to the processes that Riikka mentioned because we are Finnish, but because we can add value. We can bring something. We can help the parties to go forward on and to tackle very thorny issues. That's why we do it. So we have to be very careful that we do not kind of, that we are cognizant that there might be questions for us, especially at the beginning. But as you said, Antti, I think peace building and peacemaking is extremely complex kind of process that you work with. It's not a one single huge process that you run. Nowadays, it's really, there are lots of actors, there are kind of overlapping mandates, and typically you have UN, you have regional organizations, you have private organizations, you have states, you have local stakeholders. There's lots of actors, and it's crucial, I think, and managing that and being a part of that whole ecosystem of peacemaking in a country, be it in Libya or Yemen. They're all different, or Afghanistan or Ukraine. They are different, but what is really important are the contacts, and that you have really good contacts and open contacts to many different corners. And I think that's what you said. There might be new possibilities and new resources, new contacts that the kind of new organizations provide. So that could really be an important added value, let's say in the Balkans, or some other places where NATO still has a significant resources and presence. So, or the kind of NATO analytical capabilities around the Mediterranean, they're quite significant. So these contacts and the capability to exchange ideas is always really important. So that gives something new. And that's the plus side for this clearly.
Maybe the question that comes to my mind, and I think is of interest for the audience as well, do we have examples of countries that are both strong in peace mediation, peacemaking, and are at the same time NATO members? Do you have any examples of this?
Yeah, it is. it is absolutely clear if you think of let's take up Ukraine now. That the countries that have been most that country that has been most involved into the any type of mediation is Turkey. It's a founding member of NATO. That's kind of significant thing. Also, if you remember the early days, Israel was quite active, and Israel still has a contact to both players. Kind of, I wouldn't describe Israel as a military non-aligned country. So that's very clear that and if you come closer to Finland, Norway is a good example. You might remember that it was a few months ago when the Taliban acting minister came first time for Europe, he came to Norway, and Norway has for the long time worked on large dossier of mediation issues from Colombia to Sri Lanka to Middle East to Afghanistan, and it's again a founding member of NATO, and that's they do, and they have been able to do it. So in those terms, I don't see that as a kind of non-starter. I don't say that the NATO somehow clips our wings, at the CMI's wings, to be honest, being very frank.
I think now we could move to discuss sort of more deeply the role of CMI with regards to the NATO membership. As said, CMI is an independent but Finnish organization, and we obviously sort of part of this Finnish ecosystem in peacemaking, but we are not sort of part of the official Finland or part of the official foreign policy. How do you see this difference? You referred to this a bit already, but does the NATO membership has a different impact on CMI than on Finland's official foreign policy? How would you define this?
Yes, I think I am. Let's be very clear on this. I am responsible for CMI and how CMI reacts and how CMI steers. I'm not responsible for the Finnish foreign policy, and I'm kind of layman commenting and giving my opinions are opinions, and then people might share or might disagree, and that's good in democracy that we have a debate. And I try to not to talk so much about what Finland should be and how Finland goes, because I think it's not my job. My job is to steer the CMI. Yeah, CMI is independent, and we get about half of our funding from Finland. We are in some places quite closely identified by the government, and even if we always claim that we are independent, and we consider ourselves independent, but clearly countries that do not have a tradition of independent kind of NGOs or civil society, then it's difficult. It takes time to prove that we are actually independent. But I think that's something that we are. We are, and in a way, what Riikka mentioned at the beginning, we have been launching a drive to increase our endowment. It's a part of the kind of one aspect of that, an important element of that. We want to show our kind of that we are independent and having more independent resource base. Now we rely on the states, and of course Finland is one of the biggest benefactors or contributors. So that's why. So I think it is part of that, the reaction or the kind of, as from CMI side, it is important that we want to really emphasize and underline our independence, and we also want to do that in a kind of financial sense. Of course, we do that in a kind of, as I said, Antti, I think it's easier for CMI to show that we have not changed, because we do that every day in over 20 peace processes and dialogue processes we are involved. So that's something that we really we show it, and as I said, I've been almost a quarter century of a Finnish diplomat, and I'll divulge you a secret. Finnish diplomats are not called because they are Finnish diplomats. It's very rare that you get approached that you are Finnish diplomat. You get approached because people think you have solutions to problems that are being discussed. If you are France, if you are US, if you are a big player, that's different. You have to have these big players around the table. But small countries like Finland, small players like the CMI get invited into these tables only if we have solutions, if we have ideas, if we have ways to resolve the problems. And this is something what I tell to my colleagues that, hey, let's look for the solutions. Let's look for the ideas that we can approach, and then show with these ideas and the added value that I said, that show the added value that we have. And that is something that we can prove basically every day, and we have to prove every day when we are engaging these dialogue processes. That I see is, and that doesn't change. That remains the same. That remains the very same. But clearly we have to be even more clear, even more kind of clear in our minds, and also with our partners, what is that value added, that this is something what we do, and to show that, you know, there's no hidden agendas, for example. That's an argument I can think, okay, now we are promoting some other agenda, then Finland is a NATO member. What we have said, we always promote the agenda of our partners. We do capacity building. We look in the peace processes. We try to be very careful what we bring to these peace processes ourselves. We try to find the right people, and we try to help them capacitate, increase their agency to bring the peace into the countries. That's what we do. And I see not big thing there to be if Finland's military belongs to the defensive military alliance or not. So that's in everyday work, but you know, at some higher political level, that might be an issue. We have to be willing to tackle and answer that question. It's a legitimate, valid question.
So to speak, we have to be more careful in dealing with the conflict parties and pay extra attention to communicating our sort of profile, that our only goal is peace, and we don't have any sort of other agenda, so to speak. That's right.
Yes, and if we have to be, I'm maybe that's the Finnish, that we have to be very clear what we do, and what we add to the table, and also listen very carefully. This is what I tell to younger colleagues when they go, listen to this, listen to our partners, and let's try to answer. Let's not. And my experience, I worked with the Afghanistan issues before. I felt that we took our problems to Afghanistan. It would be much better to start to resolve the problems of the Afghans or the people in the field, in the situation, in the conflict situation. Let's help them to resolve their problems. Not even try us to resolve them, but help them to resolve them. That's the only tenable way to go about it. That's what I kind of keep on telling. And I think that's what the kind of defensive alliances are, not here or there, if you think it that way.
Just one thing to remind you in the audience, please use the question and answers box for your questions. So not to put them in the chat. We can pick them from there, the questions and answers chat, so to speak. So thanks a lot already for these. I think there are many questions, but please bring some more in if you're willing. I think Janne, we can a bit come back to the question of this so-called Finnishness in peacemaking that you already referred to. As we know, Finland has a long tradition and sort of solid reputation in peacemaking. We have these high-level mediators as President Ahtisaari, other people as well, Elisabeth Rehn, Harri Holkeri. Those kind of figures who have been working in the field of peacemaking as well. So there's a long tradition for this. But how would you still sort of summarize the key strengths that we Finns or Finland have in peacemaking? How would you define these sort of assets, so to speak?
I think we have unique as a Finland as Finns, we have unique assets when it comes to peacemaking and kind of the active peace policy. I think to start with, it's about the society. It's how our society works. What is the kind of we are small, Nordic, open, democratic, inclusive society. The way we resolve conflicts, we make. Just give you an example: the NATO decision. Absolutely crucial, kind of existential big question. How the Finns dealt with it. Very cool-headed. Issue that has huge emotions prior and maybe later. The way institutions dealt with how the Finns came together. I think there is something, and maybe just the NATO decision is an example that there is something in the Finnish society that can deal with this kind of situation. No, you can go further in what happened during the Winter War and so forth. Coming together when there is something really essential or critical for the nation, and just finding ourselves, even if there are kind of deep political divides. And I think that is quite unique, and that is important. That is something other nations could learn. And that's something that for us comes naturally. And I don't know, I don't know what it is, but I think there is. You can feel it, you can see it, that there's a capability to make decisions and reach and do processes in a very meticulous way, like the NATO, and then that you have a maximum legitimacy. At the same time, very practical and very kind of quickly. So that's something that Finland, there is a unique Finnish society, and I would argue. Then, of course, history, it's important where many places where we work, we don't have a colonial history. We are not involved into all that. That is highly significant if you go to the Africa, if you go to the Middle East, and if you go to many places. I think that's something which is that should be mentioned, because the Finns don't realize it, but that's an important thing. Then I think I think we have a great story. I always said this is a narrative. You know, if you think a bit more than 100 years ago, Finland was an absolute basket case, economically, kind of politically torn, civil war. Let's say European basket case. If you would see a country like that now, my God, what will come out of that? 100 years later, Finland is the most stable and the happiest country in the world. You know, the stuff that went through with the wars and with the EU memberships, with the Nokias, it is a really interesting story. And that when you tell that around the world, it attracts people, and they say, wow, you did it. What was the kind of, and that's something that it gives a real legitimacy. And I think that is an interesting, you rarely see that kind of rags to riches stories in the international relations. And there's lots of explanations for that. I think the story is great, and it kind of grabs and it captivates the audience. Finally, I think there is a kind of tradition, the skill and kind of diplomacy, and the way we have been, and the Finnish diplomats have been in a tough place, very often kind of between big players, and trying to maximize the Finnish room to maneuver. So very good diplomats and capability to really do something. It's kind of really almost impossible, conjure things, you know, the CSC in the 70s. It was kind of really skillful diplomacy that when it was put together, and that requires certain type of approach and kind of understanding and tradition how to do that. How I see, in a way, President Ahtisaari, our founder, is in a way part of that tradition, but at the same time, I feel in many ways he epitomizes. Kind of all these things come together in him in a way, that he is a kind of diamond, but all these kind of pressures or the processes have been. So I'm always considered him more of a kind of example of why and how the Finnish kind of way and thinking and the peacemaking is so important. I don't want to raise him kind of above that he's but he's really the product. And if you look at all his personal history and how he has dealt with the issues and so forth, he really is in many ways linked into all these traditions that I tried to describe. But I do think that the Finland is uniquely positioned to have an active policy to promote the peace, and that's something. It's a tough job, but Finland is very uniquely positioned to do that.
Thanks, Janne. As you said, in many of the conflict countries where CMI also works, we can people can be inspired by the Finnish story. And what comes to my mind really is that at the moment we are really going through these turbulent times. Obviously, the war in Ukraine, other resurging conflicts. We have the corona crisis, food crisis, climate change. Many of these factors really make societies more fragile and more prone to conflicts as well. What you said about the Finnish example and model, is there even more space for this Finnish idea of the factors that could be and should be taken into account when building sustainable societies that could be more better protected from different crises that makes them vulnerable as well? How do you see this? Is there more space for the Finnish model in creating sustainable societies?
Yeah. I was CMI. We're going to have a refurbishment in our office, and last week we were cleaning. We had to move with swing office, so we went through lots of old stuff, and I found a huge pile in President Ahtisaare's old office of reports of the Nordic model. And I think there is something what you said that clearly that this is I think much of I think the President Ahtisaari and the CMI, I think there is a sense of that the Nordic way of things could provide something. But at the same time, I've been as I said, I've been diplomat for 25 years. Most of my time I have sat behind the Finland, the plaque or the flag, so representing Finland, and I think there is no worst way to start any statement to saying that, okay, we had that problem 10 years ago, and this is how we resolve it. You should follow us. That's a non-start as a diplomat. So basically, I think that we might give inspiration, but I think it is crucial that all those countries, all those societies do need to find it themselves. They will find their own way, but they might, and this is something that they have. Typically, we go into the conflict situations when different parties of conflict or different parts of society have issues, and we have to find the people who are willing to try to address some of these issues. We help these people. We could draw from our experiences that could this help to you as a proposal. But I would be very careful of saying that, hey, let's all become Nordics. I was 4 years the Finnish ambassador to Rome, and I had quite a great time. So I would not like to see the Italians turn to Nordics, even if there are quite a lot of Italians who would prefer that. But I think it is great that we all look our own way, and to also, I think we are sometimes the Nordics a bit too eager to push. But I think it's something that we have to be careful that we don't. I think we have something to offer, but we have to be a little bit careful with that.
Thanks, Janne. I think we could now move to the questions. I see quite many of them already in the Q&A box. Just going through these, there might be some tough questions as well for you, Janne. But the first one actually that I saw that I can't find here anymore is that, could you elaborate a bit more about the women's role in peacemaking? I mean, obviously it's a question of equality. There's a big gap in this. Women can't really make it to the peace tables, so to speak. So there's only a small number of women at peace tables, even though it's obviously an equality question, and it makes peace processes concretely also more effective. How would you elaborate this? What do you have in mind when talking about women in peacemaking?
I am muted. Sorry, I was so eager to talk, so I forgot to unmute myself. My first point is my first point is really that I'm really proud that I would argue that the CMI is the best and really the top private actor on the women in peacemaking field. We have for a long time, we have a significant team, and we have been working very hard on the women's inclusion issues. So that is one of the core strengths of the CMI, and I think that goes back to the really thinking of President Ahtisaari, that you have to bring everybody around the peace table. I think that is a crucial element. And I'm really proud that the CMI is so good, and CMI will remain good. As Rika said at the beginning, we had two focal priorities. It is the women in peacemaking and digital peacemaking. And it means that we are at the top, I would argue, really top of the world league on the women in peacemaking. We want to be top also in the digital, but we don't want to lose. We want to remain on the top on the women. And I think that's from the very institutional perspective. On the more practical kind of why and how, I think we know for sure that if women, and I think there is an empirical evidence, if women are part of the peacemaking process, the kind of the peace treaties, so the processes are more successful. They are more lasting, and there will be less violence down the road. That's very clear. I think there's a strong empirical evidence of that. At the same time, we have a UN Security Council resolutions 1325 that clearly says this is the duty, this is right thing to do. So I think there is now how you can practically promote it. I was just a week ago in Oslo in a major UN kind of seminar to teach UN peacemakers, the key peacemakers, how to be more inclusive in the peace processes. And it was really, really interesting discussion, ranging from Libya to Colombia to Libya and different places. So really, it's how you can practically promote that. But that is crucial part, very important for the CMI, and it will remain so. And I think that's one of the major issues that we have in the mediation industry.
Good. Just looking at the other questions here, maybe this could be something you would like to answer. Something you referred to earlier as well. I mean, Olli Silander is here asking whether the fact that we are going to be NATO members would change really anything, because we've already been we've been already observers in NATO. So is that a big step eventually? Does it change really anything?
I think it's I think Olli is right, and this is I tried to capture with my metaphor with the player, substitute player who is warming up just outside the field. So if it's a plug and play, all the Finnish systems are fully compatible with the NATO. That has been for the last years. So we have been there, and so it is not as dramatic change as it seems. But at the same time, it's a bit of a self kind of reflection, because this is something that we need to think. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a Finn? It is clearly a much bigger issue in Sweden that have been made the neutrality some sort of mantra, and it's very important. I would argue that the Finns are very pragmatic people, as Olli asked, and I think having kind of relatives that have fought and died. So this is something that I think the Finns look what is kind of how you can preserve the security of the country, and that's it. And then, you know, other foreign policy and other aspects come to it. So I don't see that as a dramatic. And I think in those terms, I'm kind of relatively close to what Olli says. Thanks.
Okay, then Mia Filardi is asking, if I understand this correctly, how will this NATO membership, or maybe the overall discussion around NATO, Finland becoming a NATO membership, does it have an effect on the Russian-speaking minority in Finland? Do you have any answer on this?
It is always dangerous to speak for any minority, but I think this hasn't been. There has been, in a way, there was a strong plea early on when the attack started from all the heads of the parties that the Russians living in Russia should not be harassed because of this. There was a very strong kind of sense that they are not to be blamed, that the Finns should not. And I think that was early on last spring. That I do remember that the kind of political leaders came out that you should not victimize individual people. There hasn't been a really back the kind of the. There is no kind of there are few tens of thousands of Russian-speaking Finns or Finns who have kind of dual nationality, but I kind of there is a quite most of them also speak Finnish, and I think they're quite integrated. And in a way, what happens in the Russian society, I think the problem might be more of that there has been. I was when at summertime I was at the airport, Helsinki-Vantaa airport, and it was packed with the Russian people who tried to leave Russia through the Helsinki. The flights to Italy, to Switzerland, to Portugal were full. All those who had the Schengen visa seem to be leaving. So my sense is that the quite significant portion of the Russian population, and those I have seen having had the public opinion, have said that what happens in Russia is a tyranny, that it doesn't reflect that they are more concerned of their loved ones in Russia, what happens there. So I would not see that as that they would feel threatened. They would be more that they are happy for their security, but concerned of the security of their loved ones in Russia and their relatives. So that would be but this is really very kind of hearsay. I don't have any kind of firm, but that's how that's kind of reflecting the Finnish news and also my own experience at the airport and so forth.
Okay, then we have a question from Ismo. Does CMI support indigenous communities in their conflicts with host nations? For example, the Sami people.
We are not. We are not involved in the Sami conflict. This is something that I honestly don't know. Has there been at any point request for us to help in those issues? We, as Rika told, we get lots of requests, and we always look very carefully what request we react to, and we act upon, to put it that way. And that's something that if we were to get the request to be involved in the Sami people's issues, we would think very carefully what is it that we could offer into that conflict. We typically look for kind of violent conflicts, and also I'm a bit hesitant to go very close to Finland if the Finnish government or those our funders are involved. If Finnish government is involved, because that could raise the questions about our impartiality. It would be easier. It would be easier to ask about that. So if that were to be put, that we would be involved. We have not, as far as I remember, been In Sami, we haven't had the request, but yes, but then we have been in Aceh and a bit further away places. So that would be my sense that my question, if my colleagues would, if Antti would come to me and said, hey, we got the request to do something with the Sami or certain project outside, what is the added value that we can provide? What is that we can provide that the other organizations cannot provide? And that off the cuff, I can't answer that question, and that would be and that's why I'm not sure that that would be my question in that case.
Okay, then we have Esther Nelson asking a timely question. What is CMI's Finland-specific strategy for peacemaking in relation to Ukraine-Russia conflict? I think you can't answer on behalf of Finland, but maybe something on CMI's role.
Yeah, hey, Antti, if you don't mind, kind of longer, because this is a good and really deep and excellent question. So I'll kind of a little bit larger and kind of longer answer. Sorry, Esther, but I'll try to be. I think first, how we see Ukraine conflict is the Russian attack to Ukraine is a part of a larger kind of development. What I see, and I think the UN Secretary General said in the spring, that what we have seen the last 10 years, let's say after the Syrian war got worse, is that there is politicians more often resort to military means. And that's something that's very concerning. What I've said, I mean it. If you look at Libya, if you look at Yemen, if you look at what happened in Myanmar, if you look what has happened in Ethiopia, what has happened and is happening right now in Karabakh, what has happened in Afghanistan, and what is happening now in Ukraine, and then if you add, there is a much more military coups in Africa right now that we have had. So there is a tendency to resort to military force, and that's something that's very concerning. And we did not realize it in the Europe. We thought that Europe is safe from that it could and would not happen in Europe. Then it happened in Europe, the Russia attack Ukraine. And that was a great shock for all of Europe. And what I always, when I go outside Europe, I say it's an emotional issue. We thought that it would not happen in Europe. And we are in quite a shock that has happened. That's something that is important because outside Europe, it's concerned, what's happening? I said, we are emotional. This is something that we are very, very upset and it's shocking. It is emotional. It's not a kind of intellectual problem that how you can resolve the issue, but it's an emotional issue. It's emotional. It means, and it's good in emotional terms because it makes much easier to rally support and you can see the incredible generosity that there has been. The European countries, the Finland and others have showed to the Ukrainian refugees or the support for the Ukraine. That is significant, that comes from the emotional reaction. That this is something we have to do. This could happen to us. We have to help them. They are very close to us, and that's something that is very important. And I think that has carried much of the support for the Ukraine, the emotional answer that we have to help. At the same time, we know from other conflicts that the kind of emotion is not the good way when you are trying to resolve conflicts. It is the conflicts are easier to resolve when you try to bring the emotions down, and that's something that makes the kind of difficult to discuss kind of the strategy, because it is more of a kind of intellectual analytical exercise at how you could do, and then the emotional at what has happened and how to support Ukraine. And the situation right now is still very strongly that there is very, very strong feeling and emotion to support Ukraine. Ukraine has not, the Russia, the parties that CMI has been working in Ukraine for many, many years, almost 10 years, since the Crimea. So we have good contacts there. We are in contact with the parties. There is no willingness to engage in kind of peace negotiations, peacemaking. There is a fundamental lack of trust between the parties, and it would not be possible to do anything. And then the parties do have a contacts, they could contact each other, but clearly they don't trust, they don't want. And if the parties don't want to make a peace and negotiate, there is no way you can force them to do it. And that's what is the situation. Both parties still think that they can enhance their position through the military means, which is the tradition that let's use the military force to resolve problems. So both parties still believe it. In a way, the large scheme of things is that there will be some sort of peace down the road. What kind of peace there will be defined the success of military success in the field. So it's logical to support the Ukrainian efforts, because that would be the only way, that would be the best way to promote sustainable peace. That's the logic in Europe right now, and that's the logic in Finland right now. That's CMI, us. We have realized that it's useful to talk with these both parties, keep in touch with them, and talk with them, and hear them out, and give them some ideas and reflections. Work with the parties, and then maybe at some point they will come into the conclusion that it would be better to negotiate, but then there will be the issue of lack of trust, which we need to be bridged. But that's down the road, when the parties really get the sense that might be something worthwhile. But it looks very dim from the perspective of peace, that there is very little prospect for immediate peace. I'm sorry about the long answer, but I think this is one of the crucial questions in Europe right now, and in many ways shapes the context we live and we work.
Good. Maybe another question related to the situation in Ukraine as well, but also on a more general level with regards to the UN. There's an anonymous person asking here, I'm very disappointed in what I perceive to be passivity and even total inaction of the part of the UN in stopping war and military aggression in the world. How can we make the UN more effective in executing their main mission? You know well the UN, you've worked there for several years. How do you see this?
Yeah. UN now commenting more as an ex-UN diplomat than the kind of the CEO of CMI. What seems to be what is the problem? The conflict in Ukraine, the Russian attack in Ukraine, is absolutely a conflict UN was not built to resolve. That's my point. That there is no, UN was not equipped to deal with this kind of issue. Why? This is a situation when the privileged permanent member of Security Council, as a veto-wielding permanent member of Security Council that has or should have special responsibility for the maintenance of international peace, one of these countries attack a neighbor to acquire kind of territory. This is a situation that no one thought was possible at the kind of when UN was founded, and I think that's at the kind of that's the nub of the problem, that the UN was built to resolve conflicts between its members, but not with the member and the permanent member, because these permanent members were given a kind of special responsibility, and they had nuclear weapons and all that. And this is really the idea. As I said, this is a bit like a police officer would start to beat somebody, and then who would then be responsible for apprehending the police officer? And that's why I think this is something, if you look at from the perspectives of the UN Charter, that this is something and it's that's why I think it is extremely difficult issue for the UN to resolve. Thanks.
Thanks. I think there are a few similar questions on the Ukraine conflict and our efforts there. Those were answered, I think. But then, are you willing to answer this question? Can CMI help with the current Ethiopian issue? I think Ossi is referring to the Tigray conflict. Do you have anything on this, Janne?
Yes, we have. I think this is, and one of my more normal tricks when I'm interviewed in Finland, and I emphasize other conflicts than Ukraine, because it is really that, as I said, the emotional reaction that we have on Ukraine. I think in the long run, the crucial question is that whether the Europeans, now the Finns, you the Finns, we the Finns, we now feel how it to be threatened by war and threatened by violence, by a potentially violent neighbor. Can we now kind of, as we go along, this issue will be resolved? Can we now say that other people and nations have the same situation, be it in Ethiopia, be it in Yemen, be it in Karabakh, Afghanistan, that can we find that the emotional, can this sense that we have been threatened help us to support maybe those who have been, and I think this is something what would be important question down the road, that other conflicts that we cannot think that if we cannot let the conflicts outside Europe to rage. They will come to Europe at one point. I think that's the point. Specifically on Ethiopia, I think it's a very good question. It's a serious situation. Lately, it got better. Now it got worse. And honestly, I don't know the latest. I've been following most carefully about the Karabakh today and the latest information on that. But the Ethiopia is a good case that there is. It's a real issue, and Ethiopia it's a crucial state in Africa. It's an important state. We as a CMI, we have been working in Sudan and South Sudan with the African Union. We have worked with the Red Sea Basin for some time. We have this year started to work also to look for more of the whole. Our sense is that you cannot take Ethiopia-Tigrayan conflict out of the context. You have to look at the larger context of Horn of Africa. You have Somalia, you have Eritrea, you have Sudan. So we have been trying to work on the kind of dialogue processes that we bring we have participants of a kind of larger area together to discuss the possible solutions of the area. We also see that Saudi Arabia across the sea, Red Sea, has a significant stake in the stability in that region. So what we have been trying to create a kind of regional platform to discuss and just to generate new ideas how you can approach that. It is not only to really, because there's a host of issues. There is a Sudan, South Sudan, there's the relations to GERD, to the dam, there is really Somalia, there's Eritrea, it's a really kind of tangle of problems in that region. And I think that's something we have tried to spend and to use some kind of our convening power to bring some people together to start to think about the solutions for the area. It is interesting that if you look at the US this year, nominated the first Horn of Africa special envoy. So it's clearly that the US, I think now there's a second already going, but clearly US recognized that that is a very, very important part of the world. And if you look at the kind of the gas discussions and all that, if Russian gas is being replaced, let's say from Qatar, the Red Sea and Suez Canal will be even more economically important route to Europe. So there's lots of angles for that part of the world. But the CMI, we try to be there and be part of the discussions and convening groups to discuss these issues. And bring it higher up in the international agenda. Thanks.
Good. Let's then have a sort of a very interesting question, maybe a lighter one, from Kath Uusitalo. She's writing, I have read that President Ahtisaari was big on sauna diplomacy. Does CMI use that technique in its peacemaking efforts today? Do you have sauna at your offices? I could maybe answer the last question. We don't have a sauna, not at our current premises, but maybe in the future in the new office. Hope so.
Sauna, I can, it's kind of personal reflection. I think it's a good question. Those of you who live in New York or maybe further afield might know the famous 10th Street sauna. It's in East Village, 10th Street, East 10th. That there is a Russian, I think it's a Russian-Israeli sauna now, but that the President Ahtisaari used to frequent. And they still, I've been there many times. They still, I was there last time. That's 7 years ago or something like that, 7-8 years ago. They still had the picture of President Ahtisaari on the wall with his signature, and it's really that was something that is important. And President Ahtisaari told the story of that sauna where he used to go there often when he was living in New York. He told me the story that he remembers there is a nice bar by the sauna, nice, it's very rudimentary Russian type of sauna, and you get the Zakuska and a Baltica beer, at least at that time. And there was this guy, President Ahtisaari told me that he had the tattoo in his hand. And President Ahtisaari asked me that, what is that? And that's from Auschwitz. And this was something that really stuck into the mind, and that's something that really President Ahtisaari told me himself, and that was an important place for him, and that story has stuck into his mind. Sauna, I'm not sure. Yeah, we don't have a sauna in our office in Helsinki. We do have, we can, but when we had our last staff retreat, we didn't go to sauna together. So CMI has become an international organization. So significant part of our kind of workers are not Finns anymore. So it's just we might have to introduce and start the sauna courses, but it's still important for, of course, for all Finns. But yeah, this inclusive world, women peacemaking makes it maybe. I haven't tried that lately. I think last time I've done the sauna diplomacy myself would be 7-8 years ago. I was exactly this 10th Street sauna with my Russian counterpart in New York. We had a great good time in a very, very hot Russian type of sauna, and then having the Baltica beers afterwards. But yeah, I have used that, but the CMI might be less. Thanks.
Maybe a follow-up question on this from me. I mean, when talking about sauna is obviously something maybe that belongs more to the past, and as you said, not sort of today's peacemaking, so to speak, but something that could be of interest for the audience is that many times when we have these sort of negotiations, many breakthroughs and sort of interactions happen during the coffee breaks and sort of in these more unofficial settings. How would you describe this, the importance of these sort of unofficial settings in peacemaking in general?
Sorry, Antti, would you repeat? Because I was reading the latest comments, so I missed your.
No problem. Yeah, just what came to my mind on this sauna diplomacy is that it has a link sort of to our world of peacemaking as well, because many times what happens in the meeting room, actually, when we meet the conflict parties, those might not be sometimes important, but sometimes breakthroughs and sort of important interactions happened during the breaks, actually, the coffee breaks, sort of these more unofficial interactions that you have in peacemaking. How would you describe this this sort of unofficial side of peacemaking?
Spot on. Yeah, I think it is. I do remember 2008 after the Georgian War. I was in Geneva for the discussions of when we started the discussions on the Abkhazia and Ossetia. It was we started. It was during the Finnish OSCE chairmanship that I was involved very much. It was tough going to get it going. There was lots of diplomatic procedures, what language, who sits where, what kind of nameplates, all absolute horror. Who speaks first, who speaks then? That was just almost impossible to put together the kind of diplomatic choreography. So we ended up having really, really short plenary meeting, formal meeting, kind of practically non-existent, and really long coffee breaks. Because of course, in the coffee break, you don't have these issues with language you speak, what is your nameplate, and where do you represent, who speaks first. So we ended up spending quite a lot of time on the coffee breaks and discussing these issues, because you cannot in the formal process, because in the formal process there's typical issues: who recognizes who, and what is really the language that you use, and it could be really, really. Usually these things are really symptomatic for that, and then it's much easier to discuss the real stuff. And if you can make any headway in the real stuff, we did not make that much headway on the real stuff, but if you can make a headway on the real stuff, you can actually it might be possible to then tackle one of the procedural issues that are really, I guess, one of the last issues to be resolved in many negotiations. So I think you are very much on. Antti, do you want me to tell what I was asked about the joke? I think it was a Monocle interview about the sauna diplomacy. What is my favorite sauna diplomacy joke? The story goes that the President Khrushchev visited President Kekkonen, and they were in sauna together, only two of them, and then President Khrushchev said to, or the Secretary General Khrushchev, not the President, Secretary General Khrushchev said to President Kekkonen that, "Dear brother, why don't we get rid of this ridiculous border between two of our brotherly nations?" And then in the sauna way, President Kekkonen didn't immediately react. And then they went out and did swim, maybe ate something, maybe drank something, and they came back to the sauna. And then President Kekkonen answered, "Dear brother, I think I am too old to lead such a big country." And I think that captures something that in sauna diplomacy, all kinds of things are possible, and you can kind of you can try out different ways to tackle issues. But that's my favorite of how you can what it means, that what you can do in a sauna diplomacy. But thanks, Antti.
Thanks, Janne. I think that's a good way to end this interview conversation with that joke. I think we have a few minutes left, and we thank you for this opportunity. I hope you received something meaningful from this discussion. Many thanks to Finlandia Foundation, Suomi-Seura on this opportunity. Janne, any final words from you, and then we can finish, I think.
Hey, thank you for this. And I just realized that things have turned very dark here, as you can see. I warned you. So this is Finland in the autumn. As you know, hey, thank you so much for this. This has been interesting, and it really great questions. And it's good to have your questions, because it just forces us also to think and to look our position. So that's something that, yeah, very good. And thank you. And also hi to many friends in US, and I hope that they are listening to this, and really looking forward to seeing you in future Finlandia Foundation, Suomi-Seura, and CMI events. And please, if you can, please support us. And Riikka is the right person to really look the ways to support us in practical terms. But many thanks for this evening or morning for you guys. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Janne and Antti, for the most interesting and inspiring panel. The amount of questions and comments show that the topic is very hot at the moment, as we know. There is a huge need for more information on what's happening and why. Nobody has a crystal ball that would tell us what is going to happen next. However, global overlapping crises challenge us to react fast. But what we do know is that Finland's work for peace is globally acknowledged, and this expertise is definitely even more needed in the future. Our organizations, Finlandia Foundation National and Suomi-Seura, are happy to support CMI's important work for peace. And thank you for joining the webinar, and thank you for all the valuable questions and comments. Hope to see you soon again, and I wish also you have a good day, have a good night here in Finland. And now, Tim, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Tina, and thanks to Suomi-Seura for being a wonderful partner with us in this endeavor, and great thanks to CMI, to Janne, Antti, and Riikka for a really very informative program. We really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I know everybody who has, and we have really a lot to talk about, and I like to say that this is probably the first of many conversations we will have, because it's a very timely topic. So thank you very much for all that you've done. A wonderful session, and good afternoon or good evening, depending upon where you are. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.